I want to bring somebody on who's less of a guest and more of somebody I consider to be a friend and a confidant, and somebody who embraces some understanding that we're still working our way through. And with that, I want to introduce once again my friend James Horak. James, welcome back to OffPlanet Radio.
Thank you, Randy. My privilege.
Thanks for stepping in tonight, too. As I pointed out, my guest for tonight, for whatever reason, couldn't be here, and you nobly stepped into what has been a pretty fiery show tonight. So thank you. Thank you, James.
I would like to throw my hat in the ring. After listening to Mr. Hemingway, it was very mindful of what you would expect from a major network representative to say about alternative media. Even the paranoid schizophrenia crap.
Well, I didn't see anybody with a medical degree around to give me the diagnosis, but I'm assuming that that would mean I'm lined up for a shot somewhere along the way and a nice stay in a padded room, but I don't think anybody's medically qualified to make that assertion based on evidence that's been advanced so far. So
I'll venture my knowledge of psychiatry. I will say this, that anybody that attempts to diffuse a situation where his guilt is found out will do everything they can, if they're a pathological narcissist, to cast and attribute motives, cast aspersions and whatever, and to play that card. I guess everybody in the alternative media who's got anything significant to say would, in that category, be a paranoid schizophrenic, wouldn't we?
Almost by trade.
Can I get a patch? I'm a paranoid schizophrenic, too.
I think the lines have thinned a lot. You know, actually, there's people out there that have kind of embraced this idea of insanity being almost interchangeable with spiritual awakening. And I think anybody that's gone through intense spiritual awakening, whether you call it Kundalini or some other type of thing, understands that there is a point where it really does hinge on insanity. The question is what you do with what you receive out of those kind of experiences. For some of us, it's been a lifetime journey in that realm as well. How about it, James?
Well, I think you can keep your focus if you're telling the truth. If you're not telling the truth, then you backpedal like Mr. Hemingway did.
There's a lot of things that I would like to talk to you about tonight. Let's see, today's the 12th. We're coming up on the winter solstice on the 21st. And I wanted to get your perspective on what's going to be happening, if you see anything specifically in that time frame, or what you project out based on your understanding and based on what I know about you, how you are able to receive certain very critical information streams. Let's put it that way.
Well, I have consciousness, and that one of the things that keep it an inherent trait of earthbound humanity is the inconstant gravity wave caused by the almost constant adjustments that have to be made to keep our moon in orbit around the Earth, because it wants to go out, it wants to come in, and this changes not just the gravity wave, but there are fields, magnetic fields on the moon and on Earth that are constantly changing, and this causes a rift in consciousness. You have a subconscious and a conscious mind working against each other. You've got the conscious mind that is extremely fearful of the subconscious, because the subconscious is capable of telling the truth in very uncomfortable situations where the truth is not appreciated.
Yeah.
And so that gap, it affects not only the ability of the mind to work together, but it affects the way we observe time, cause and effect, how we can be manipulated.
Do you see a heightening polarity going on right now? I mean, and I'm even talking about mainstream. I observe people, and I have seen the energies ebb and flow over a long period of time, but I've seen quickening cycles right now, James. And I'll just peg it as the first week in May, we had this supermoon, and I actually had some pretty profound experiences with that supermoon that entailed pretty interesting stuff, including portals and craft and watching people go through switching and things like that. But I'm seeing a quickening of cycles now where we're going through heightened, I guess you would call it contrast, heightened movements between almost at times euphoria to just utter despair in people. Is that something that you're seeing, and is that a symptom of what we're going through right now?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, if you remember Art Bell, he constantly referred to the quickening. And that was a theme that he followed up on his show when he had specific guests. But it is a valid observation, and it has something to do with the cycles. It has something to do with the desperation of the powers that be as they can drive more and more attempts at controlling us and our lives. So what we have been involved in the last few years, since 9/11 specifically, has been basically the reaction to not knowing whether we should conform or not to the police state movements that we have seen government and military take. We are left floundering more or less. The moral issues that have arisen have lied quietly in the back of people's minds. They know that Gaza is genocide. They know that these chemtrails exist. They know that Fukushima is still spewing out radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. They know all these things, but they wrestle with keeping this to the back of the mind. So we have a conflict going on in most people today between what they deny or unrealize that's there, because they're not fools. They have a quiet consciousness about some things, but in the back of it is this raring to know, what the hell should I do next? And it's in most people. I come across it all the time, and whenever I say certain things, it comes out. And they're happy to vet it because it's building there. And we're coming up on a time when this is going to be automated by the alignment of planets. Because as these planets line up, that's going to take more and more pressure, this tug and pull of the moon and earth. So it's going to, for a period of time, alleviate this split consciousness that we live under. That is one of the ways we're controlled. One of the things we're controlled through, because the greatest inner weakness that we have is ambivalence. And this split in consciousness keeps the ambivalence fire going. We center back to find a comfort zone. You know, I talk about genius. What is genius? We don't have geniuses anymore on this planet that are out-and-out geniuses in anything they think about, like we had in the Renaissance, in the pre-Renaissance era. The great men like Copernicus, like Michelangelo, like Leonardo da Vinci. These were geniuses. These were geniuses in anything they tackled. We don't have them anymore. We don't have them anymore because we have over-compartmentalized, we've over-specialized, we've driven people into niches, and that's part of the mind control. So, and the worst part of all is that we do have the potential for this sort of thing, but the information is denied them. The science has betrayed us. Government agencies that have data that would help us, if they throw the information out that they're hiding, you would be surprised who might step up. We might have a 12-year-old step up and make connections that scientists can't make.
Oh, I absolutely believe that. In fact, I believe that right now there's at least 2 generations walking this planet that are latent genius, and in some cases they call them attention deficit disordered, or they diagnose them with any number of other, autism. I've met autistic children that I know what was latent inside of them was not even just genius, but a beautiful soul in a protective cocoon. It's almost like these souls have now come into Earth with armor around them to be birthed later. After.
Oh, yes. Survival creates genetic potentials that monsters don't want you to know anything about. I've often said that what they're calling mutations is simply the stress that will cause certain genotypes that normally, without this stress, would not designate a particular trait. But under certain stresses where these combinations are beneficial to the survival of the species, and that particular trait is survival adding, it'll express. In a combination that otherwise wouldn't express would remain genotypic as opposed to phenotypic. And I've said this to a lot of people, and it's caught on with some of them. And they understand that these are the concerns why there are so many black ops operations, we call them abductions today, that are out to ferret out every genetic combination and what potential trait that it might, under certain circumstances, lead to and so forth like that. They can't do it. Even with Mr. Computer, the mainframe they're building in Utah, and they've finished. They've got that thing up and running. So what they're doing there, and this is another thing, genetics and computer science, they are creating more problems for themselves, for the obsessed controllers, than they understand, than they'll ever be able to cope with. It's just like when somebody lights too many fires and says, well, I'll put this one out and that. Eventually, there are too many to put out. And that's what's going on politically. That's what's going on in science. We have a period of time now, leading up to the 21st, in which all sorts of things can happen. I mean, it's not just that people are vetting out other people. It's not just that people are having moments of depression and so forth. It's basically that in the back of so many people's minds is this awareness that we're on the cusp of something big. And they don't know whether they should fear it or welcome it or revel in it. But I would revel in it no matter what.
I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but we come into this world sort of cloaked with amnesia, but every human being on this planet has imprinted in them a reason and a mission for being. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's sort of an adjunct from predestination.
Okay.
And, well, I would say this. I would qualify that as an ingredient that some people work around, an attitude, but I would give vastly more credit to our attention to free will.
I don't disagree with that at all, James.
Well, I know you don't. In fact, we agree on most things.
We do. We work our way around it. And the reason I ask you that is because I do believe in the potential of people and the potential good of people, and the roles that they play can become very convoluted. And the energies that we're dealing with now are elevating things in a way that is almost dividing humanity in terms of both who's playing light and who's playing dark, and probably who's going to survive and who's not.
Well, it's 50-50. You have a 50% chance of surviving this lineage and becoming a part of something much vaster, much greater. 50-50. And you'd never had that before, and there have been other lineages. You know, the evidence of that is carefully suppressed, but still, it's there. You know, they can't suppress all of it. And we hear stories from time to time, but every time that there is a monumental work that is discovered, the first people to get access to the interior of it are the Illuminati. They send out their Bilderberger trained individual like they have with this recent find in the Busagi Mountains in Romania.
Right, Peter Moon's work with Transylvania's sunrise. Yeah.
And they make sure that if there's any records in there of a prior lineage that's warning the people of today what went wrong then, that they don't get it, that it's suppressed. And that's a concern.
It's really been almost like we've been sheltered from understanding our roots, both in terms of origin on Earth and galactically.
If you pay attention, if you have done some research over the past 20 years, like I'm sure you have, you know that there are events that have happened that they're rewriting today.
Yes, I'm watching history being rewritten in my lifetime.
Yeah, and that even though we have technology creating new concepts that require new terms and phrases every day almost, the dictionary is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's no accident, because the richness of our thoughts are put together and constructed with words. You have fewer words, you have less rich thoughts, to express at least. Of course, there are visionaries that don't need words, but that's another thing.
Well, as I understand it, going back to the court of Queen Elizabeth I and the Rosicrucians, they had planned for a time when language would contract. In fact, English itself was a sort of a designer language that collapsed Old German into English with the purpose of, there's thoughts we can't communicate even now. And anybody that's ever studied a foreign language knows the difficulty there is in taking certain phrases. I mean, I studied French. There are terms in French that don't translate well into English, hence the original thought. Russian's a very complex language. German also contains these embeds. So in a lot of ways, we have a truncated language system, which means that we are no longer able to intellectually or verbally express certain things that I believe are coded into us.
I think that's one of the things that William Shakespeare was fighting against. Bill Johnson fought against it. The truncation is a perfect word to use for the thought limiting of language. And although Mr. Orwell plagiarized 1984 from Zamaitan's We, he didn't do the justice when he was describing Newspeak that Zamaitan did. Zamaitan saw up close what bureaucratic terminology would lead to. And he knew that it would catch on with vernacular and that it would become politicized. In our language today, much of the same thing is happening. It's very subtle. But we see it first in the news media. And then it begins to spread and take on its own personality over a period of time. I'm not talking about the way that youngsters truncate their text messages and so forth. That could be harmless if they are given a decent education to begin with. But they're not. So it's a threat. It's a threat to creative thinking. And, we need all the creative thinking that we can get.
I have a question that came out for the chat room. It was asked, the last time, James, you were on, you were asked what the purpose of man on planet Earth was, and you replied to survive, and that you mentioned survival again just now. Is our spiritual purpose to exist on Earth?
No. I know there are people that believe, and there's some really good people that believe this is a test. Everything is an experiment in the universe. I don't know about intention, about the great. I know that there is a designer, because I see that in everything. I don't have to have any privilege over anyone else to go out in my backyard and see the design of a tree, to see the animals that are constantly running around, and to see the way in which all of these respond to you. But when you mess with nature, you create chaos. When you disregard nature, when you try to pretend that nature doesn't matter, or you can supersede her, or you can betray her like the moneyed do today, then you're in big trouble. And so then I guess maybe that aspect of soul testing comes into it. But it's not along the lines that your soul is in danger or your spirit whatever. It's a matter of what succeeds best in the universe.
The follow-up to that was basically a rephrasing, and they ask, is there a spiritual purpose? Oh,
yes. There's always a spiritual purpose. All spirits are immortal. A spirit, regarding the difference between a soul and a spirit is a complete mind and soul embodied, that which receives a unified consciousness at the time of death. And, of course, there are people that have had near-death experiences that know this to be true. They'll tell you, but maybe not in those words. And when they come back, they're different. I have known people that because they had had massive brain damage or severe brain damage, when that mind went back to repair itself and heal, got rid of all that rubbish that we grow up being fed until we're 6 or 7 years old, which drives that gap between the subconscious and the conscious mind further. And one of them in particular that I know has unified consciousness, which is wonderful. And this guy is really neat.
There are people that walk among us that possess this ability, James. And I don't know that we quickly identify them, but when you encounter beings, and specifically human, I think there's a power, a magnetism to that, because they're not only connected fully to their own being, but they're connected to all the things that you've talked about. And it goes back to the EMVs and this intelligent management of the solar system, and how we're not just floating human entities. We're connected to something greater. We're connected to the power behind the EMVs, behind the Earth itself. You called Earth she, and I believe that kind of alludes to the fact that we understand that there's a living consciousness that's embraced by what we consider to be nothing more than rocks and dirt circling around in space.
At some point or another, everything becomes purposeful. And the drive to eliminate what is not purposeful or aberrant has never caught on here due to this split consciousness and the way it's been opportunized, and that a technology developed to maintain that. There are a number of things that if you changed, even the way in which electricity is generated, if you change these things, you will notice a growing consciousness in people that is a lot more productive, that is a lot more coherent, a lot more moral. People are less than they should be, but through artificial means. I mean, it's not natural for there to be a number of aberrancies like that mall shooting that you were talking about. That's not natural. That's not part of anything other than aberrancy. And, you know, one of the things that I discuss is common sense, and that is if you have a culture that has star travel technology, you possess a technology that one person can put in their hand and destroy a planet with. That culture can't entertain aberrancy either collectively or individually. So in order for it to survive its own technology, it has to find a way to remove these unnatural, like aberrancy, from the collective and from the individual. And it's not a matter of punitive measures. It's not a matter of eugenics. It's not a matter of anything other than culture. I remember a story when Norway was occupied by the Germans in World War II. There was this little hamlet that had a mayor, and the German commandant called the mayor in one day and said, it is wonderful the way that you have discipline here, because we haven't had any crime or any petty theft or anything since I've been here. I must say, this is incredible discipline. The mayor looked at him and said, no, it isn't discipline. It's culture.
That's actually an interesting observation as well, because, and we actually used to talk about this for a while in a sort of distorted context, but back in the 80s, we had the culture wars, which were largely narrowed into conservative and liberal dogma, but there was this idea that there was a war on the culture. And you and I have lived long enough. We've seen the changes that have happened over the last 40 or 50 years of our lives, and how people are less genteel, less well-spoken, less respectful. I mean, even just a lot of the things that I talked about in the first hour tonight, these were not things that were done in public because there was a code, and the code was based on honor, and we've seen almost all of that now evaporate.
Well, the first thing that a manipulator, invader, and in this time frame globalist, tries to do is to hatch up a mentality that makes people that have these complaints, like you and me, to believe that they've got the answer for all these problems they created. You know, create the problem, you offer the solution, and then you come in and you grab more control. It's an old Hegelian formula. And, you know, it's being used now more than ever, and people either never understood the model or they're blithe. You know, I'd rather think they don't understand the model rather than be indifferent to something that is after everything they have, including their last breath. I don't know what to think of people that can't get to first base with the obvious, other than that they're under mind control. And that's what we have. We have a large population of people that are in denial about the obvious because it's in front of them every day. They work harder, they make less money, or at least they have less spending power than their parents had. I can remember when a man could make a good living and support a family and kids and send them to college and have a 2-car garage and 2 cars in it on his salary. And now, a man and a woman both working can't do that.
Well, and they've buried our culture in this financial system, this toxic money system of debt, that everything's financed and funded by debt.
Yeah.
And the illusion that as money is extended exponentially in terms of debt because of the leverage that they've put behind it, the bundling of all these debts and sale to foreign countries, which have resulted in compromising our national sovereignty as well as our financial ability to even negotiate on a global level in terms of currency exchange and things like that. And I can't help but think, I know that this was pretty much all designed a long time ago. I mean, anybody that does the research can go back through the record and see that this was all planned. You know, the funny thing about these people is that they map everything out in front of us, and we're so damn stupid we can't even read what's in black and white.
Well, the last time this country was facing the emergencies that it is today was the Great Depression. Coming out of the Great Depression gave certain self-made tyrants the ability to actually work a whammy for the cartels and the families that own the cartels to steal gold that was artificially priced in this country at between $38 an ounce to $42,
yes,
while it was going on a London Metals Exchange for $100. But to steal that, rape the country's gold supply, go in on Black Thursday and go through everybody's safe deposit box and steal whatever they wanted to, and more than anything else, the gold, and haul it off. Those people were never compensated for that. That's what's coming now. You know, I wouldn't recommend anybody buy gold because they can impose a Gold Act again and take it away from you and say, well, you're an American citizen, you can't own gold.
Well, I think my guest last week kind of mapped that out a little bit. If you're an American citizen, you gave them consent to take your gold anyway, right?
Yeah. That people forget that was in effect for 40 years. It went into effect in 1934 and stayed in effect until 1974 and was repealed under Gerald Ford. It was one good thing he did. But then again, what happened? You found out that a lot of people have been hoarding gold and came up with it and started selling it. And, you know, the market for gold grew out of that. And it wasn't for a number of years before it was reflected honestly in value. But gold is an arbitrary standard anyway, and so is silver, so is platinum. Platinum is far more plentiful than you're told, just like diamonds.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, no, those These are commodities I'm familiar with, and, you know, platinum is just outrageous. What is this, like over $1,700 an ounce right now?
I'll tell you something about platinum. The platinum-producing nations are allowed to produce a certain percentage of the platinum that's used. The greatest consumer of platinum is the oil industry because they use it as a catalyst in refining gasoline from oil. And some of it isn't recovered. So they're the greatest user of it. But platinum is plentiful. The Rothschilds control the platinum cartel, so they're not going to appreciate what I'm going to tell you. Canada produces a share, its fair share, so to speak, of platinum, and it's mined in the Laurentian Shield area of Canada. And it is very sensitive about how much of an economy that represents, so that it's top secret just how much that they produce and how much money they get and what percentage of the Canadian GNP it represents. But the formation that is mined in the Laurentian Shield isn't nearly as enriched as where it pops up in Washington State.
Wow, who knew that? Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. That formation is called the Golding Formation. It goes all the way across the country, and the richest part is in the United States. I'll give you a place where I prospected, and I got chunks of platinum near the vein that blow your mind. A ton of it make you rich. And in Yakima, Washington, and I just love betting this. In Yakima, Washington, they're the part of the Golding Formation that is very apparent. In other words, there are black hills out there called Rattlesnake Hills. Guys, if you will just go down and run a placer operation below Rattlesnake Hills in Yakima in the creeks and everything, you will be able to legally get rich very quick off placer platinum.
I'm pretty certain, though, that Bureau of Land Management probably has a lot of this locked down, don't they?
No, that's open ground. That's open ground. Now, in Texas, we don't have any BLM land. It's all comes through the Economic Geology Department of the University of Texas. That's what they subsidized that school with, which, the oil companies corrupted that a long time ago. If you find anything of mineral worth, even if it's not oil, you have to put it up for bid. And, of course, the oil companies are there waiting in line, whoever's turn it is, to grab it right out from underneath you. But there's gold and silver in Texas. There isn't much platinum, but there sure is up in Washington and across the north, all the way to Canada, above Minnesota. So I hope some people get smart to this and get wise to it, because, it's about time the truth came out. And, I know so much about this because I prospected and because I came across so much stuff. And I worked as a fire essayist when I needed money, and I was working in a laboratory in Grand Junction, and I was looking at there is a manual on how to dress ore for fire assay or for acid tests and so forth, and this manual is pretty good. And the older it is, the better it is. But it tells you that if you fire assay for the precious metals, gold and silver, that if you don't prepare your specimen before you put it in the furnace with the copper reduction method, that the platinum will go up in a vapor and just, it'll precipitate in the flume. It tells you that. But there isn't a fire assayist or chemist today that'll do that, because they all know they'll get in trouble. And they'll lose their contracts with the government if they're doing water works, testing the purity of the water, making sure there's no contaminants from oil company exploration, that sort of thing, where they make the most of their money. Then they'll lose all that if they let the cat out of the bag.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it at the time where I was working in this lab in Grand Junction. The chemist there was a very good chemist, and I got on to him about that. And he just shook his head. He wouldn't say a word. And so I'd go out, and he liked to drink. And I'd go out after the day's work and get a bottle of Old Fitzgerald, which he liked. And we'd sit down and get just soused on it. But I'd get some stuff out of him when I did it. I love this guy. He was a damn good chemist and a good man.
So there you go. There's your tip for how to perhaps...
Oh, I can tell you a lot of crap like that. I can tell you, I mean, I'm full of it. But, you know, that's just one of them. I think that every show I'm going to do, I'm going to at least bring one revelation to you.
That's good. That's golden. And, you know, I think anybody that goes back through the conversations you've had with anybody finds nuggets. I listened to one of our shows, one of the first ones we did, and I'm like, I didn't hear that the first time.
We live in a society where secret keeping is the mainstay of the powers that be. There are a lot of people that have asked me, well, if that's true, why aren't you rich? And then the next thing they'll ask me, well, if you say that, and it's such a big secret, why aren't you dead? And I just say, well, you know, I live a charmed life, I guess.
Well, I think you have a fair amount of protection also.
Well, I hope so.
I believe you do. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, we've kind of skirted around it, is 2012 and what you see coming. And you have a marvelous show that you did with Shuni and Tours, 2012, The Return of Electric Consciousness. And I don't necessarily want you to repeat everything on there because I want people to hear this and I'm going to post it. But can you kind of nutshell a little bit electric consciousness and this contraction of time-space that you're seeing coming?
Well, I made some ambitious statements, and it's going to be different for everyone because everyone's different. But you're gonna have the closest thing to unified consciousness to what your ancestors had from late night on the 21st. And it may continue. There are things that are in place to make this more enduring than it would otherwise be. Mayan shaman that I listened to, I was very impressed with here recently, who gave a dissertation on this, and he did his best to reconcile ancient beliefs. I
saw that video, by the way, yeah. Yeah.
I liked him very much, and now we have the powers that be concerned about that, so that they are banning the Mayan priests from their temples on the 21st, which it shows you that there's something to this, right?
My understanding is that they're also closing Giza in that period of time as well, which I thought at the time that I saw it was jaw-dropping. I don't know if they closed it earlier this month, because we had another critical juncture, but my understanding is that Giza is going to be closed. So effectively, they're trying to shut down the sacred sites of the planet right now.
Well, many of these monuments, not all of them, are built because these people had an understanding of harmonics that we don't have today. It was the Indians that taught the Spanish how to prospect for gold. They had divining pendulums that they used, and I've seen some of these come out of Indian graves. They look like plumb bobs, and they're usually out of a particular type of rose granite, and they're beautiful. And I had a gentleman give me one time.
So this is like a dowsing rod.
Well, a divining pendulum is so much better because a divining pendulum can answer any question that you ask and give a yes or no answer. So you can sit there, how deep is it? Is it gold or is it, you know? And what a divining pendulum is, it's a meeting place for the conscious and subconscious mind.
Unified consciousness.
Well, at that point, at that focus.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you, yes.
Yeah, because it's working, the subconscious has a way of communicating to the conscious through harmonics with a divining pendulum or with a divining rod or sometimes with a Ouija board. But it is an elegant construct which gives the subconscious a chance. And the only other time that it gets a chance is in a significant dream. And we have significant dreams, but we don't keep dream journals. And if we did...
All of us don't.
Yeah, if we did, because they leave us. They leave us. The conscious mind has this centering mechanism to get rid of it. Because, like I said, your conscious mind is so afraid of the subconscious that it is preventing you from gaining the use of it. You put these two together, you have a collective consciousness you don't otherwise have, and you have access to genetic knowledge. You have these two things, and of course, if you're born and then you suffer a brain injury, you have to be trained to get that collective consciousness, and I don't know. I've never seen anyone that obtained the genetic knowledge, but they become rapidly so much more than they were before, and I wrote an article on this UN officer who was a North African native who had lost just about all the brain above the brain pan and yet became a veritable genius.
Yeah, there's a number of surgeons, I'm trying to think, that have written about diminished brain mass, or even in some cases, separation of brain hemispheres that have seen this. I think it was Dean Radin wrote about this. We're dealing with something that's quantum and not quantitative at the same time.
Well, let me tell you the mechanism, and I teach this in Unified Consciousness. One of the principles of unified consciousness is power of expectation. So if a brain surgeon is going to operate on you, he prepares you for the worst, doesn't he?
Yeah. All surgeons do that. You'll be great if you don't die.
Yeah. The shaman prepares you for the best. And that's why these people that have this primitive brain surgery, trephining, out in the wilds of Africa, like this gentleman I was talking about, they come out with the very, very best consequence. And it is remarkable. I mean, I wish that they hadn't decided to hide that documentary, because that documentary was it was just elegant. But they went to see the shaman that had done the trephining on this UN officer. He told them where to find him. And so they find out my God, this guy has done over 2,000 trephining operations, never lost a patient, and almost all of them are improved because these tribes practice ceremonial warfare, and sometimes people get head injuries or they fall or something. They're so far out in the bush that that's the only way that they can deal with minimizing the damage. Do you know there are even trephining societies that bore holes in people's heads so they can think clearer? Really? I don't recommend it. I'm not pushing that. Don't do that. But
well, that kind of goes back to the whole third eye ceremony in Tilop Sangrampa, where they literally would burn into the center of the forehead to open the third eye. That's brutal. I think we have more. That wouldn't be
the place I would do it. If I was going to do something as silly as that, that wouldn't be the place I would do it.
No. You've got to go further up on the cranium.
Yeah.
My point is that you just dropped some nuggets that people need to connect, and one of them is the energies that you're talking about that are coming in such a very short period of time now. Are there things that we can do to begin prepare, and also what do we do on this particular night when you say these energies are coming in, when we're going to begin to experience this?
Be up at 10 o'clock. And, if you've got friends and... now,
you say 10 o'clock, you're Central Time, I'm Eastern, so coordinate that off UTC, I guess.
Yeah, I would say relative to coming into the new day, a couple of hours coming into the new day, because it's not going to happen simultaneously over the planet, and this is just roughly. I would make a celebration out of it. I would be with all your friends. And, if it's not too cold, build a bonfire and sit around it and talk about your expectations, because expectations have their own power. But it's like the shaman said, pencil and paper. Well, if you talk about what you experience, it'll be as good as pencil and paper because you've shared it with another person.
My understanding of that is better. because of the vibrational aspect of our voices and the creative aspect of sound. And you talked about harmonics a little bit, and I'm real interested in that. I mean, I've worked with it playing music and doing sound engineering, and it's a fascinating subject that I know far too little about, but I understand the vibration.
Yes, and this goes right back into what I said about we produce electricity at 60 cycles per second. That's bad. It's very bad.
Yes, it is.
And, people in Europe that are getting 220 are brighter, have more clarity of thought, just simply because of that. And you remember all the trouble Tesla went through just to try to get Edison to buy into alternating current.
Okay, Colorado, this backed right into your question you asked about changing the electrical megahertz of radio broadcasts in Nazi Germany. So that gives you a little indication of exactly what this was about.
Yeah.
See, we answer questions on the chat room. We just back into them. James probably doesn't even know you asked that.
No, but it's a good question. And we have lived among people that are so concerned with maintaining their status quo that they will do anything, they'll subject us to anything that they think is going to keep them in power and keep them in riches and keep them in control. They don't understand the human heart because they've denied they have one. They denied spiritual reality. They deny God. If you ask me what God is, I would just simply say, I know there's something that is responsible for the design in the things that I see, not just astral, but small things that most people are not really impressed with because they see it all the time.
I think part of this awareness that you're talking about comes with an understanding of the uniqueness of the things we see around us and even how we see things around us. While I enjoy going out into the desert in Sedona, I can walk a few miles from here and be in mountains. And the mountains are different every time I go there. It almost sometimes feels like a stage was prepared for you to go into nature.
Well, that's a special place. And there are a lot of people that have gone there because they heard that it was a place where they could suffer a quiet spirit, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where they could be more attuned to themselves and to others and to nature. And that's true. And that even though it's not that far from atomic testing and other things that have been used, it has a way of purifying itself. Sedona is a wonderful place to be. I've been there a few times and wish I could have lived there.
Do you kind of see this thing that's happening specifically on the 21st as kind of a wave? Is it that kind of movement?
Randy, it can be what you make of it. What you're going to have, it's like, for some people, it's going to be dramatics. For others, for you, you're already aware. You have your feet on the ground. You have common sense, common decency. You don't lack very much. So for you, your joy is going to be in watching other people that you know benefit. And, back during one of the things that was so hip to do was watch other people when they did their drugs, how they would react. And, I
fully appreciate that. Yeah.
It was a lark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I walked my share of people having a bad acid trip off.
I saw people who wrecked their minds with some pretty hardcore stuff. I mean, I'm not
the stuff that Timothy Leary was peddling.
There's levels to everything, and some people are just excessive, and they abused themselves, and they paid a horrible price for it. But we talk about consciousness, and then we have this whole ascension meme that's circulated now to the point where, in a lot of ways, to me, it feels tawdry. It feels like it's lost its luminance. But there's a valid concept contained in that I don't want to see get lost in the meme machine of the internet, because as human beings, we're going through a shift. Some of us have known this for all of our lives, frankly, and sensed it very strongly for a number of years. The elevation of that is important, but at the same time, staying focused on what that means exactly, because it's not spiritual superiority, right?
Well, we have people that because they have been disappointed in religion and religious teachings, the same way that you and I have been, but they elect to deny God, to deny the Spirit, and so forth. These people aren't committing a crime. They are reacting in their own way to what they see as fraudulent. And religion has justified that reaction, whether we want to think of it or not. And so today we see the woo-woo crowd doing the same thing to many people who want to be spiritual, who want to study the spiritual and define it for themselves, but they come in contact with the woo-woo crowd that are moral cowards, basically, because they use woo-woo to keep from being accountable for doing anything about the evils and about the harm done others. They try to teach people, if you just meditate, or if you just, keep to the positive and all this, while these children are being abused, while people are being, genocide is going on in Gaza, while all this evil is going on, and we're being fed a pack of lies about all of it, and they're sitting there meditating. That's disgusting, and I can understand
I can tell you that what I learned about meditation, I learned when I was young, and what I've learned about it as I've aged is you don't need to meditate anymore. The whole point of meditation is to be able to access a state that you can go into whenever you need to. It's a contact point, and ideally you would live in that.
It teaches you how to overcome tension and overcome angst and assume a quiet spirit. But there's no reason, if you are wise and you have learned the ways of the world and you anticipate the reactions you're going to get when you speak the truth, and, in the morning when you wake up, you're going to be over all that BS that liar put out on you, because you know how. But there are people that it'll eat them up and eat them up and eat them up. But you ventilate it, and you'll be over it because you know how, Randy.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that don't. So meditation is an escape from what they can't deal with, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that for them, but they can learn by learning the substance of something very, very thoroughly. You overcome using it as a crutch, and they use it as a crutch. Hate to say that. They're using meditation as a crutch to escape reality, to not have to face it. It's a form of denial the way they do it.
And thank you for that. That was actually a very succinct way of putting it, because I've spent months trying to nutshell the concept of what it is that some of these people out there are peddling.
Well, if you're cottage industry, you have a price, don't you?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a cottage industry. At the end of the day, it's about money, fame, and power. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of people that are in ufology and in alternative media that if they had a chance, if they had the money or whatever, they'd be up on Wall Street, or they'd be running a corporation or whatever, and they'd be doing the same thing in the Gulf of Mexico BP did, and justifying it the same way BP did. And they'll tell you, if you ever nail them down, they'll say, well, you do it too. Because
the cost of doing business, that's the one that I always heard.
Well, these are narcissists, and there are a lot of them. There's a growing number of narcissists, and, to a narcissist, there's nothing in the universe better than them. Better than them. They're the ultimate. They are God, right?
By contrast, if we're going to go through this heightened, I'll just call it, well, you call it a gravity wave, an energetic, is there not going to be equal and opposite reactions, or am I dragging Newtonian physics into this?
No, I don't see anything negative coming out of it. You're going to see I think that it'll be dramatic enough. There'll be people who are in a comatose state come out.
Well, that's what I was getting at. I get the sense that some people are just going to go nuts.
No. They'll just be more truly what they are. And self-aware. I think a lot of people that are on the wrong track or misguided or whatever, that may change.
Oh, I would really like to see that. I'd like to believe for that.
Well, they're going to have their moment of clarity. And, if they're capable of insightful thinking and not too self-absorbed, I think we'll end up with more friends, personally. I'm hoping that we will, and hopefully our shaman and other forces in the solar system will find a way to make this endure more than the 18 minutes that these bodies will be in perfect alignment.
You talk in this interview about, and I'm quoting here from the post that Tours put up, soon you'll see days and seconds, years and hours, eons in a lifetime. In that compression mode, all of a sudden, time really kind of collapses on itself, doesn't it?
You are going to have a taste of what I call time compression, where time is no longer the lord of your life and where you're beyond this obsession with time.
Yeah. And see, that to me is so exciting because that's something I've seen for a long time.
When these planets align, there'll be an assonance. You're talking about harmonics will affect the universal harmonics of consciousness. And the important thing is, and this is the principle, the guiding principle of it all, once you realize you get a taste of something like this and you share it with others, it concretes the memory of it and the taste of it and the feel of it so that you know what's possible. If you know what's possible, then you've got something to work for and study and believe in. And I think that there will be people that hear what I say about design and say, oh, well, what's that? But they're going to know firsthand what that is because they'll have the way of pulling things together in such a way that they'll see design. It's a form of clarity. That's what we're missing. We've got so many facts, we've got so much data, and none of it mixes right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why this war against grasping the concepts that you've brought forth and even the deliberate willful distortion of Dr. Bergeron's work recently? Why is this so disturbing to the order? And I realize that sounds like an obvious question, but I'm still baffled by it.
You can't control people who are capable of clarity. You can't control them. Clarity can begin with very small things, but clarity does not exist where truth is not the standard. And if you make truth the standard, you can have clarity, you can possess it, but it's the most uncompromising force, the most uncompromising energy there is. And it will not tolerate. It's like the subconscious mind. If you've got possession of that subconscious mind to work with the conscious mind, my God, man, you have a strong sense of right and wrong. And that puts you at odds with more people than it should. And the manipulators can come along and use that, like this Hemingway. He didn't do a good job of it. He needs a little more training by social engineers. But he's got the makings of a good manipulator. He's got the will for it, the will to lie. And I hope he has a comment about me now.
I really like, the way you kind of pictured this, because the barometer of humans right now is all over the map. And we go into an insane mode this time of year because of the commercial system that has attached itself to the false religion that calls itself Christianity. And I get really cranky this time of year, and I don't like to. I think this is why Dickens was commissioned to write Scrooge. I don't want to dump on, joy that people may get from things either, because that gets judgmental too. But it's like watching people right now is painful because they are pressured. They're very obviously under stress. They're in a hurry. They're very unaware of anything around them. And this is the most dangerous point in which to live in that agitated, completely segregated form of consciousness.
You know, there are people that benefit from being religious.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
And they're a benefit to their fellow man because of their religion. But a true Christian is a wonderful being, you know. They really
I understand that. If they would just read what was spoken by the Master.
There's this misdirection and mind control in religion. I was accused after I started speaking out of having a Christ complex. And my reply was, well, if I have to have a complex, it's a pretty good one to have. But seriously, if you keep the Ten Commandments, that's going to put you at odds with so many people in this world today, isn't it? It's going to be tough.
Well, they got refined down to 3, and I don't think we're keeping those. I mean, basically what Jesus said was contained within the 3 commandments was the law and the prophets, and that was love your neighbor as yourself and, you know, love God, which means that you have to love the creation of which we are ourselves part of that foundation. You know, basically what I'm saying is the fractal aspect of God is embedded in humanity and their consciousness.
Even if you look at the religious teachings emanating from many of the religions that have survived, they basically teach you that you're stewards of the earth and keep faith with that. In so doing, I mean, you're pretty much an ecologist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'd have to come down on whatever caused Fukushima, and you wouldn't rest until you found out, would you?
Yeah, and that's like pulling teeth out of a whale because it's been so obfuscated at this point. And
you wouldn't be raising children to go to Afghanistan, would you?
No, you wouldn't. Well, and probably thinking twice about even going to the west coast of the United States. And I'm sorry because I have people I love on the west coast of the United States. And our government, who was supposed to serve us, has hung us out to dry because, like, what happened in the Gulf is we had a disaster of, frankly, epic proportions that was obfuscated, lied about, covered over, and actually turned into a bigger disaster as a result of negligence and greed. And that's the world that we live in, and that's the consciousness that, God, I pray, I hope, you know, somehow or another what you're talking about can begin to loosen the grip of that particularly dark spirit.
We don't know. We don't know. We do what we can, and that's what's important. You know, that good people do what they can, that they be brave and speak out, that they go to their neighbors. And even though they may be thought out of line or over the top or whatever, that they try. They try to reach their neighbors. And I'll tell you something. There'll come a time when their neighbor will say, you know, you cared for me. And that'll mean something. And all men should look upon themselves as brothers. That's the height of any philosophy or teaching, because it allows us to identify with each other in ways that we might not have, and to realize that this brotherhood that we feel is greater as it grows, and the effort that we make to keep peace with each other, to understand each other, to try to establish something more than just a shallow understanding or a phrase that's supposed to denote an emotional response to what the government wants you to have, so that they can vilify somebody or they can turn you against a notion that is not in keeping with their immediate agenda. So if you want to overcome tyranny, you first do it at an individual level as a person, and you experiment with how best to reach others to do the same thing. And right now, the noblest thing would be to sort people that are on the cusp, Pull them over to your way of thinking and be a peacekeeper. That's the best thing you can do. But, of course, it's a difficult thing to do. It's one of the most difficult things to do of all. There's plenty of good biblical admonitions to that effect, isn't there?
All the great teachers did, you know.
All of them.
Teachers pointed to that. James, I can't thank you enough for coming on, and that was actually a great way to kind of tie up a lot of things that have flowed through this show tonight. I know you're doing a fair amount of interviews right now, and you're also on Facebook, is that correct? Yes,
I'm on Facebook.
People can reach you there.
Yeah.
And the website of record for you is emvsinfo.blogspot.com.
You know it better than me.
I made it a point to pull it up because I know you always forget it.
Yeah, I do.
Now I know that this was a connection because I remember things. I go, James is not going to remember that website. So, and right now you can go over, there's a YouTube there of the 12/21/2012 Return of Electric Consciousness show with Shuni and Tours. Shout out to Shuni. He's been a real friend to me, and Tours as well. And so look at that. And our friend Crystal has done some incredible work once again. And you will find articles posted both at EMV's info and on OffPlanetRadio.com. Crystal's latest article is posted on my blog.
It's a good one.
Yeah. And she did an interview with the 100th Monkey Show. And that's posted as well because she really goes into some things there that for Crystal were kind of deep. And Crystal's deep anyway, so now you got an ocean to swim in. James, thanks a lot for coming on. We're going to close it out for tonight. It's been an interesting evening and a long evening. 12/21/2012 is coming, and listen to the show again and see if it speaks to you. This is OffPlanet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Really, really look for it.